Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you. As always, this is the Week 8 college football show. I just lost my latest win streak with a loss on the Dodgers. Not great. What can you do about it? We move on from that. The starting pitching handicap I thought was right in that one, and it was not, so whatever. More pissed about the Yankees winning, probably. My rooting bias is superseding my enjoyment of money right now, really. Let's talk about college football, I guess. I don't even know what's happening in tonight's games, really. I know Purdue got shut out, which I did not expect that to happen at all. Hamza, what's up, brother? Shiva, you're voting for Shiva Ayadore? Yeah, I mean, he's going crazy, man, on some of these shows. He's just going wild, going after that woman who was talking about reparations. I like Shiva. I mean, he's all right. I mean, he's a bit of a nutcase. I've met him before. I mean, I'm from his state. He's just kind of out of control. I don't know if I completely trust that guy, to be honest. Let's get right into this college football slate, man. I mean, last week, I thought I had those handicaps nailed last week, man, and I went 2-2, or no, 2-1-1, actually, unfortunately, with UCLA with a push at the end of the night there, and then the NC State one was close but didn't get there, and I had 2 blowout wins in the afternoon slate. I'm going to have 4 more plays. I'm already 1-0 this week. If you were following me midweek, I had a play on UTEP plus the points on Wednesday night, I think, and they had an outright win. So I'm actually going to wind up with 5 college football plays this week. I'm just kind of scrolling through and seeing what's going on. BYU actually is in danger of losing their undefeated status here. Interesting. I heard there was some bad call or something in the Florida State Duke game, but I think it went against Duke, and they still wound up covering. So Duke remains, what are they, a 1-loss team? Nate, what's up, man? I'm going to jump right into this, man. I'm going to start talking about some of these bigger games because my plays are pretty much not on any of these ranked games. I'm going to skip some of these that I don't think are that interesting, but you liked Duke. I did not, as you saw. Colorado, I'm not a fan of Colorado, man. I mean, I just think they're continuously overhyped. Reasonable man, that is a reasonable comment from you, yes. I don't know why 4 or 5 people are subjecting themselves to this torture, but I'll talk about Miami-Louisville first just because why not? I'm going to not talk about every single one of these games just for the interest of time, but some of these situations are more interesting than others. Miami, I don't know if it's more interesting, but Miami's up to the 6th ranked team in the country. I'm like, I don't know, man. I just don't think that they're really worthy of it. I mean, the schedule has not been that difficult for them yet, really. They're putting up a lot of high point totals. They escaped 2 games in a row, 2 weeks in a row they escaped. I mean, they had that overturned Virginia Tech touchdown call, and then they had to mount a huge comeback against Cal 2 weeks ago, actually. I think they're coming out of a bye now, right? That was 2 weeks ago. A game where I was actually on Cal in that game. So now they're facing a second straight road game, but it is broken up by having a bye, and they're coming back east at least, so they're not having to go out to the Pacific Coast again. They're not having to stay out there. So I actually think this is a better spot for Miami than some of these other spots that they've been in, because even though they are coming off of a bye, you don't necessarily love having a team coming off of a bye if they went into that bye on a win streak, because it can kind of hurt their momentum. But I think they know, man, they escaped against California, so I think that's going to cause them to focus a little bit here. Louisville, I mean, they have dropped from the rankings, but I think Miami is probably going to take Louisville seriously. I mean, Louisville's been playing pretty well. Louisville does not have a bye, and they're coming off beating Virginia in kind of a tough game. Pretty decent win. I mean, Virginia's not a bad team, so Louisville's had a few pretty difficult games in a row. So this one's just hard to read. I just figured I would comment on it real quick. Miami's up from 4-point favorite to a 6-point favorite. They are public with 69% of the tickets. I mean, obviously, when you have a ranked road team, they're going to be public, and they only have 63% of the cash on them. I don't really see that much of an angle for coming in on Louisville here, to be honest, unless you think that the bye was a momentum stopper for Miami, or you just think that Miami is just going to be a little bit overvalued, which, I mean, that might be the case. I mean, the 6th ranked team, so it's not like you're necessarily ever going to be getting value on them, especially as a road favorite. But as far as this spot is concerned, I don't think it's a particularly bad spot for Miami to be in. or did you submit to Cocktober, reasonable man? Is that what you're saying? Arizona's trash. Colorado's trash, man. I think they're Colorado's overrated, man. Reasonable man, have a good one to you as well, sir. Dylan, what's up, man? I'm watching buff black men running. You're talking about football or other sports? Basketball is even more so that. I don't know if I can become a black man. My penis size is not worthy of it at the very least. Nebraska, Indiana. I mean, that's a pretty big game as well, I guess. That's a big Big Ten matchup here. I mean, I've heard some professionals making a case for laying the points with Indiana here. I didn't really see it when I first thought about this game, but now I don't really know. I mean, this game's a hard read for me as well. Indiana's up to the 16th ranked team in the country, man, and they got all those guys from like James Madison's team last year and whatever. And I think they have Rourke, who used to be on Ohio. I think he's their quarterback now. So they're loaded with all these guys that have become like elevated in college football now up to the Big Ten, and they're all performing really well for Indiana here. Nebraska, I mean, something kind of tells me they're flying under the radar a little bit, though. But on the other hand, I mean, their schedule has not been very difficult. That loss to Illinois doesn't look that great, but that was kind of a weird overtime loss. I mean, Nebraska was a decent-sized favorite in that game, so I'm not going to totally knock them for that loss. Really, probably a game they should have won, but it was just kind of a weird game in general. So I don't even know what to think about this game, really. It's just one of the bigger games between one of the ranked teams and one of the formerly ranked teams in Nebraska here. Nebraska is coming out of a bye, but then again, they went into that bye with 2 straight wins against Purdue and Rutgers. So is that bye going to halt their momentum, or are they going to look at this and say, hey, we kind of played like ass against Rutgers here, man? Kind of like what I was saying with Miami. Like, even if you won the game, if it wasn't a particularly impressive win, sometimes you will use that bye to kind of prepare something and refocus. And it's not like Nebraska's not going to show up focused for a game against Indiana, who is going to have a target on their back because they're undefeated. But Indiana, I mean, they also have not played a strong schedule. I mean, their schedule's been even weaker than Nebraska. So, like, who the hell are these teams? I don't even think we really know. Indiana, I mean, they are coming off a primetime. I think that wasn't a primetime game. That was 2 weeks ago as well, actually. For some reason, I was thinking that was one of the midweek primetime games between Indiana and Northwestern, but it was not. It was 2 Saturdays ago. So actually, both of these teams are coming off of byes. But this bye might actually hurt Indiana more than it hurts Nebraska in some ways, because, I mean, they're just rolling. When you're rolling and you're 6-0, I don't think you want to necessarily have a bye, man, because in Indiana's case, I think you have not much to fix here. So I'm not sure that bye is really going to be a positive there, but I do know that the market is signaling on the Indiana side here. So they're up from 5.5 to 6.5. They got 71% of the cash on them, 57% of the tickets on the other side on Nebraska. So I can't figure it out. I can't really figure out why the public likes Nebraska, but maybe I'm just not reading this game right. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not playing this game because I do not have a read on it, but I have heard some professionals liking the Indiana side in this one. Nebraska sold out Indiana Stadium, so what do you mean? Does that mean Nebraska is going to have a lot of fans showing up? I mean, Nebraska, they do travel pretty well, but they haven't been a good program for quite a while. Nate, you like Nebraska there? Dylan, yeah, man. Why do I never talk about my intellectual stuff? Is sports betting not intellectual? It takes a brain. I mean, I don't know, man. I do software engineering. I mean, I'm somewhat brain damaged at this point because I had a stroke. I am a former high school valedictorian way back in the day of my class of 339. I went to college for software. I do software. I mean, people think I'm a dumbass. I'm not. The libertarian thing was totally retarded, though. I mean, I ran for president, so I spoke at the convention just because all the presidential candidates got like 5 minutes to speak or whatever. And I was in one of the debates in Georgia, which both of those are still online in various places. You can find them. So Nebraska apparently is traveling to this game then. First sellout for Indiana. Tower Gang, my role is, I don't know, man. Like, I have to, like, shove things in and kind of like stomp on people. I have to rape the show when I'm on Tower Game, and I mean, I don't know. That's just like, it's a room full of like a whole bunch of people just all talking. You got to kind of pick your spots, and I just kind of throw out like jokes when I'm able to do it, man. I don't know what to tell you about that. When I'm on shows with like 3 people or whatever, like I get way more involved, especially if it's not Tower Gang and I become the more like dominant presence in the room. All right, what else we got here? So yeah, I don't even know which way I lean. I mean, my situational handicapping tells me to lean Nebraska slightly in that one, but the market read and the some of the professionals I listen to are saying Indiana is the right side there. So take that for what you will. Auburn, Missouri. This one is an interesting one, man. I think Missouri is actually in a bad spot. Number 19 ranked Missouri in this one, and Indiana's up to 16. Jeez, I didn't even realize they were ranked that high now. Missouri has dropped in the rankings because they really have not been impressive so far this year, man. I mean, they beat BC, who BC was not a top 25 team, man. As I said, they're not a bad team, but they were not worthy of that ranking. Missouri did not beat them by that much, although they beat BC more than what that score would suggest. But this win against Vandy looks a little bit better now that Vandy has pulled off a couple of big wins in a row. But still, this has not been really an impressive slate of results here for Missouri so far. And they got absolutely annihilated by Texas A&M a couple weeks ago. But I kind of thought that was a little bit of a bad spot. I mean, the line was kind of indicating that it was at least a trap spot that Missouri was in. So I didn't expect it to be that much of a blowout, obviously. And then they kind of had a get-right game here against UMass, who was just absolutely pathetic. So obviously Missouri is just going to roll UMass, which they did. Now they get Auburn, so they're returning to SEC play. But look who they have up next, man. So this is like an almost sandwich spot because they played A&M, but they did get blown out by them. UMass is almost like having a bye in there, basically. And they do have Alabama up next. So I think at the very least, it could be a little bit of a look ahead for Missouri here, because that is a big game against Alabama up next. Meanwhile, Auburn on the other side. I mean, I think Auburn might not quite be as bad as their record looks at 2-4, because they had that just weird game that was all turnovers all over the place against Arkansas. I don't really know what to tell you about that one. I don't know what to say about the Cal loss either, though. That one's just weird, kind of an outlier. And then that Oklahoma game, I was on Auburn in that game. If you watch my show, you know that was a really bad beat with Auburn blowing a multiple score lead in the final 5 or 6 minutes of that game. That was just awful, an awful way to lose that bet. Auburn outplayed Oklahoma in that game, man. So explaining that loss a bit, and then, I mean, they lost to Georgia. I mean, what can you do about that? Georgia is really good, so Auburn, I mean, they've faced a tougher slate of opponents than Missouri has. So I think Auburn might be getting a little bit overlooked here, man, even though, yes, they are having to play 2 straight road games here. But Auburn is coming out of a bye, and I think Missouri did play last week, even though it was against UMass, so it's not like they put in any sort of big effort or anything like that. But Auburn actually did have a bye, and they went into that bye on 3 straight losses. So I think that is a situation where it's pretty helpful to have a bye, man. You come off a physical game against Georgia, a game that's going to be like physical defense, basically. You get the bye at that point. It can disrupt the loss streak, and it can help you like get healthy after you face that physical defense. So I like Auburn in this game, man. This is, out of the games I've talked about so far, this is the strongest lean that I have so far. And this line, I mean, you've lost a lot of value on this line already, because it looks like the professionals have poured in on the Auburn side. I mean, Missouri's down from 7 to 4. I don't know when it was actually 7, because when I saw it like a couple days ago, it was already at 4. So I don't know. Missouri's public, though. The public's going to come in on the ranked team. And this looks too easy, doesn't it? The line looks way too easy to just lay the 4 points with Missouri here. Where are we at here? The number 19 ranked team, a 5-1 team against a 2-4 team that has no wins in the SEC so far. And you're only asking Missouri to lay 4 points. It just, something about that just looks off, man. That line, books are not giving away free money. It just looks way too easy, like I said. 70% of the cash coming in on the Auburn side, so I do lean to Auburn. I do like that side in that one. I don't think it's the strongest play, but I do like that. I go on other shows, yes. I make the rounds in the libertarian sphere. I haven't been on any other ones for a while, but sometimes I do. Nate, thank you, sir. Nebraska, multiple home sellouts. But in Nebraska, they have nothing else to do, right? At least in Indiana, there's probably a little bit of something else to do there. Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, I mean, what goes on there? Nothing. They don't have anything to do. At least Indiana, University of Indiana is at least in, what's the name of the city there? Bloomington. I think at least that's a somewhat bigger city than Lincoln would be my guess. But I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass. I mean, I know geography, but I haven't been to those specific cities, so I don't know what I'm talking about. What else we got? Alabama, Tennessee. Yeah, let's talk about that. One of the biggest games on the slate, man. I still don't know I don't know which game was College Game Day last week, and I don't know which game it is this week either. I don't know if it's this Bama-Tennessee game or if it's the Texas-Georgia game. I don't know which one is College Game Day. I mean, you guys can inform me on that if you do know, but I mean, those two are like the biggest games of the week probably. Alabama-Tennessee, huge game. Number 7 against number 11 here. Alabama, as we know, their one loss was to Vandy, and they look like they're on a little bit of a skid, man. But again, I mean, I think Alabama might be better than they look in those last couple of games, man. Like, I think that they're maybe a little bit underranked at this point at number 7, even though we know Alabama, they don't have Nick Saban anymore. They've had to kind of reload to some degree, although I think their quarterback, Milroe, I think he was there last year, right? So they do have some of their pieces were there last year, so they do have a decent amount of experience, I think, with some of these players here. So Alabama, I mean, and of course we know they were in the playoff last year, but maybe arguably they shouldn't have been in the playoff. It should have been Georgia, but I mean, we all know what happened with that. I'll talk about it more with the Georgia-Texas game because, well, I'll just say it now, I guess, but because Alabama beat Georgia, and Alabama had to get into the 14 playoff last year because of that, and Texas had beaten Alabama early in the season, the committee could not justify putting Georgia in, or basically they couldn't justify not putting Texas in, basically, and putting Georgia in instead of them. So, I mean, my opinion was that Washington should have been left out, even though I know they made the championship. I don't think they were that great, really. So, I mean, it's just, it's gonna be better with the expanded playoff, man. I will say that. It's good. It'll at least be a situation where the team that might be the top team in the entire country, like I thought Georgia was last year, won't be left out completely. But yeah, back to Alabama, Tennessee. Alabama, I mean, they had that huge win over Georgia, right? And that was a game where Alabama completely dominated the first half, and they were looking great in the game. And then they had a horrible second half, and Georgia came all the way back and actually took the lead. And then Georgia immediately re-surrendered the lead. I think Georgia had a one-play touchdown drive, if I remember correctly, to take the lead, and then Alabama had one right back and then just wound up winning the game by that same margin, I think. So just kind of a weird game there and a story of two halves, but huge win for Alabama. So I think that does explain the loss to Vandy. It was just a major letdown spot for Alabama coming off that huge win over Georgia. So that's my explanation for why that happened, even though I know when I talked about that game on my show, Vandy was also coming off a huge win as well. They had upset, who was it that they had, I don't know. They were coming off some big game, I'm pretty sure. I forget exactly what it was, but it was a game that I couldn't play because both teams are in really bad spots. Vandy, I think they'd beaten, I don't even remember. I'll just look because I want to refresh my memory. What was it? Oh, no, they had almost beaten Missouri is what it was. So that was a big game, but I think they had a bye in there too. So it was still kind of a bad spot for Vandy, but it was a way worse spot for Alabama. So that's what happened in that Alabama-Vandy game, in my opinion. And then I think because that was Alabama's first loss of the season, I actually think that kind of had the effect of hanging them over a little bit into the next game against South Carolina. So I think that's what happened there. So now I think this could be a game where you see a focused Alabama team again, man. And I think they might have extra reason to focus because if we look at what happened last year, I think we all remember. Was it last year or was it 2 years ago? Now, I get all my years mixed up now, but I think Tennessee beat Alabama last year. I don't know. Alabama did get revenge. Never mind. I think that was 2 years ago that Tennessee beat Alabama then because Alabama did beat them last year. I thought that was their one loss last year. Of course, I mentioned it already. Their one loss was to Texas last year. What am I saying? I'm misremembering which year is which, but still, I do think Alabama's going to show up focused in this game just because they've kind of lapsed. And I think people are saying, oh, this Alabama team's not as good as we thought they were. I'm not entirely sure that that's actually accurate. I just think that that Georgia win just kind of carried over, and then that loss then carried over into the next game too. So I actually do think that Alabama is going to have reason to refocus in this one. Tennessee, I mean, you could argue they also do, and they're kind of in the same type of spot here. I think they actually came out of a bye between Oklahoma and Arkansas, and they played Arkansas and they lost the game, and then I think that might have hung them over a little bit coming into this Florida game, and they almost lost to Florida last week. So now I think they're in a spot where they're probably going to refocus as well, man. I mean, obviously you're going to be focused when you have Alabama coming into your house, but both teams are off of lackluster performances where they almost lost a game that they shouldn't have lost as favorites. So both Alabama and Tennessee are in similar spots in a way. But, I mean, people are talking about, oh, Alabama's not really as good as we thought they were. But what about Tennessee, man? I mean, they were this crazy high-scoring offense through these first 3 weeks, and now that's not looking as good. Once they start facing a few teams that can actually play defense, sort of, but I don't even know if they can. Arkansas and Florida, are they even that good defensively? Oklahoma is. But these other two teams, I don't even know if they're that good defensively, really. And Tennessee, their offense has really started to struggle, man. Their offense completely disappeared once they started facing SEC opponents. So I don't know what the deal is with that. So this game, I mean, not going to be a play for me. It's a tough read. I slightly lean to the Alabama side in this one. They're up from 1.5 to 3 as a road favorite going through the 3. So pretty significant move if that goes through 3 to 3.5. 60% of the tickets and 80% of the cash on Alabama. So they are still a little bit public. I mean, they're Alabama, so public is going to come in on them. Even though they haven't been playing that well recently. Neither is Tennessee. So that Tennessee offense has kind of disappeared, which I think is kind of the reason why some of the public is coming in on the Alabama side still. That plus just name recognition. Alabama having the better defense, which I think they do have the better defense. Tennessee's more of an offensive team. So that's what we got going on in there. Slightly into Bama in that one. You think Heupel is coaching scared? That seems kind of weird to me. How long has he been there at Tennessee there? His name looks like it's Heupel, but I know it's Heupel. I keep thinking it's Heichel or Eichel, but no, it's not. It's Heupel. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with him, man, because what he's known for, though, is really like getting out to fast starts. He's known for like running the offense like really fast in the first half and scoring a lot in the first half, and that has not been happening since they started SEC play this year. So I don't know what the deal is, but I think Alabama is the better team. I mean, the odds makers are telling you that they're the better team by enough of a margin that they're laying a field goal on the road now. So that's what we got going on in that game. What else we got here for big games? I'll talk about Notre Dame, Georgia Tech again, just because Georgia Tech was ranked at some point. They're 5-2, and this is a big game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. So it's a semi-home game for Georgia Tech in this one. But it's going to be a big game, man, because, teams are going to step it up a little bit when they get to play in an NFL stadium, right? So Heupel's been there since 2021. Scott Frost at UCF. I don't know what the situation with UCF is. I don't know which coach replaced which. Notre Dame, I mean, they're coming off blowing out Stanford last week, so I don't think there's a whole lot to really figure out about the situation here. I mean, in my opinion, both teams are going to show up focused to this game just because it is in a big NFL stadium. Like Notre Dame, I don't think they're going to overlook a Georgia Tech team. It's a 2-loss team right now. They've seen what Georgia Tech has done this season. Georgia Tech has played pretty decently, so I think Notre Dame will probably show up focused, although there is one caveat to that, and that is that Georgia Tech is going to be without their quarterback in this game, man. So that's the thing. Like Notre Dame has another big game up next, which is at it's against Navy, and I believe it's at the Baltimore Ravens Stadium, I think. Is it? No, it's at MetLife in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Never mind. I knew it was at some NFL stadium. So that's not even really a semi-home for Navy because Navy's in Annapolis, Maryland, right? So I think so that's kind of a weird neutral site game. But is Notre Dame going to overlook Georgia Tech to a ranked Navy team? It's kind of odd, man. Navy and Army are both ranked, and I think they both might be undefeated. I don't even, or no, Yeah, I think they're both undefeated. It's just crazy to see both of those teams ranked. And those are two teams that are not allowed to hit the transfer portal either. And they're just really doing well this season, both of those teams. But Notre Dame, I don't think they're going to overlook this game. As I was saying, I mean, they're in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but I don't think they're going to look past Georgia Tech to Navy. But I do think that if they're going to overlook Georgia Tech in any way, it might be because Georgia Tech's quarterback is hurt. So that's kind of the issue here. Georgia Tech, their dual threat quarterback, King, he's hurt, I think, and he's out for this game against Notre Dame, which is really unfortunate for Georgia Tech. But does that mean Georgia Tech's going to be in an injured player theory spot? It might, because that has influenced the line in this game. Notre Dame is up from 8 to 13.5 now. Going through the 13.5, it might hit 14, man. So you might get 2 touchdowns on Georgia Tech here, and it's moved like 5 to 6 points basically just because King is out. King is a huge part of Georgia Tech's offense, man. I'm not going to deny that. I don't know who their backup is. King has been their starting quarterback this entire season, so I think it is going to be a bit of a shuffle there with Georgia Tech having to go to, I don't know. I honestly don't know who their quarterback is who's starting in this game. So I don't know if it's somebody who's been there for a while. It's going to be a freshman quarterback. It looks like, I don't know. They have a bunch of quarterbacks actually on their roster. I don't know, but they're all pretty young. Most of them are pretty young. So I don't know which one of these guys is going to be. One of their guys is 6'7", apparently, Knowles. So if you know who other quarterback is going to be, you can let me know, but I really have no idea. But I mean, King, he's a huge part of their offense, but they do still run the ball really well with Haynes there. They do have a lot of pretty talented players on this offense, so I don't think their offense is just going to completely go silent. And as we know with the injured player theory, you know what I always say, man. With that injured player theory, the team usually steps it up in that first game without their star player because they know they have to play harder for that player not being there. And in a game against Notre Dame, yeah, I do expect Georgia Tech to want to put in a good performance here and put in a big effort here. But again, like I said, I think both teams will put in big efforts, but I think the motivation on Notre Dame's is probably the one that you can question a little bit more. And it's just then it becomes a question of, is Georgia Tech going to be good enough with whoever their replacement quarterback is that they can play a close enough game against Notre Dame to cover the spread? That's really the question. Georgia Tech's coming off a win over North Carolina, which I thought it was a bad spot for Georgia Tech, and they still won. Being in North Carolina is not really a big deal. So, like I said, I think both teams probably are going to show up here just because they're not really off of big games or anything like that either. This is a low total, though, at 49.5. 95% of the tickets and only 73% of the cash on the over. And it looks like it's gone up a little bit from 49, but I think probably just as a result of it being very public on the over there. So it's not a very high total. So it is expected to be kind of a lower scoring game. And it's kind of interesting the total hasn't dropped as a result of King being out. You would think that would affect the total by a few points probably because Georgia Tech's going to be in a worse situation offensively because of it, but who knows? Notre Dame is public, 62% of the tickets, 72% of the cash. If you forced me to lean on this one, I would lean to taking the points with Georgia Tech just because they're in the injured player theory spot, and I think they're getting so many points in a low total game that is just the way that I would lean slightly. Zach Pyron is going to be their guy. All right. He's a senior? How did I miss that? All right. I don't know who that guy is, but hopefully he will hopefully he'll be able to do well for them, for Georgia Tech's sake. Oh, man, I think I closed what did I close the scoreboard here? I think I did. I wanted to look that up, but all right. So Pyron will be their is he a pyromaniac? Is he going to be on fire in this game? I don't know. What are we at here for time here? I always look at them half hour. All right. I don't know. I'm almost through talking about these ranked games. I'm going to talk about a few more, though. Michigan-Illinois is actually a top 25 matchup. 24 ranked Michigan against 22 ranked Illinois. Michigan has really been knocked down in the rankings, man. So they're 4-2. Illinois is 5-1. Michigan, basically just because of their performances the last couple of weeks where they barely beat Minnesota, a game I was on because I thought that it was a letdown spot for Michigan after they beat USC. So that can kind of explain kind of a lackluster performance against Minnesota. And then I liked Washington in this game too. I didn't play it, but that was just a weird spot from Michigan having to go out to the Pacific time zone, play Washington. And it was a Washington team that might have had a little bit of championship revenge on their minds, even though none of those players are still there for the most part. And Michigan did have this game against Illinois up next. So I thought that was kind of a bad spot from Michigan there against Washington. But now Michigan, they've been knocked down to the 24th team in the rankings, man, and they're coming out of a bye. So Michigan, I think the bye might help them a little bit, man, because they went into that bye on a bad note. They lost the game to Washington. So I kind of like the scenario, how it sets up for Michigan in this one, man, because I think that bye is going to help them actually fix some things. And they may very well have reason to refocus here after a couple of bad performances in a row against Illinois, who I think Illinois has been kind of playing above their pay grade a little bit. As I mentioned, they beat Kansas, and now that doesn't look good. Kansas only has one win on the season. They upset Nebraska in overtime, which was just kind of a weird result. And now they're coming off a game where this was just bizarre, man. They were a huge favorite against this Purdue team, and Purdue just sucks, dude. And Purdue, I think, switched to a different quarterback, and whoever the quarterback was that they put in this game, like, basically lit up. It was Ryan Brown, I think. I think it was his first game for Purdue of the season. He just lit up Illinois, man. I think that doesn't look good for Illinois. They had to go into overtime as a nearly 20 or more than 20-point favorite, 21.5-point favorite. And this score was not misleading either. Purdue put up 536 yards of offense against them and took them into overtime. Just weird, just crazy. So Illinois, they might not be that good, man. I don't know if they're worthy of the ranking spot that they're in right now, or being ranked higher than Michigan. I don't know, man. I'm not so sure. I haven't seen anything that indicates to me that Illinois is actually as good as their ranking would indicate. So, and Michigan might be a little bit underranked at this point. That is my opinion after seeing what's going on here. However, although Illinois did play last week, this was their game last week, I'm pretty sure, where Michigan was on bye, like I said. So Michigan does have a rest advantage. I think the bye will be a positive for them. But this game could shock Illinois, man. Like, it is possible Illinois just overlooked Purdue, because Purdue has sucked so bad this year that Illinois might have just thought it was going to be easy and just looked past them to this game up ahead against Michigan here. But still, I don't know if you can excuse them blowing a 27-3 lead in this game. I don't really know, man. So I don't know what's going on with Illinois. That is not the mark of a great team, though, if they let a bad team like Purdue come back on them like that. So I don't really know. So I kind of like the Michigan side here. Michigan, and the market does seem to agree with me, and this line is way up from, it looks like it was a pick 'em at one point to a 4-point favorite. So as I said, Michigan is actually the better team here in this game. The odds makers are telling you that. But man, this line has gotten away from us. If you like the Michigan side, I think the value is probably not there anymore, having to lay 4, and it looks like it's going through the 4. Michigan surprisingly a little bit public. I would not have expected that, because I would expect the public to be looking at this and think, oh, Illinois is the higher-ranked team. They're a 1-loss team against a 2-loss Michigan team, and they're at home, and we're getting 4 points. It looks like free money on Illinois, right? So I'm surprised the public is on Michigan to the tune of 64%, but Michigan is a team that carries a lot of weight behind their name recognition, so that's probably why. But just that sentiment that I was just talking about there, that I thought would have the public be on Illinois, I think that still does apply to the fact that this just looks like a very suspicious line, man. You have a Michigan team that's ranked worse and has a worse record than the Illinois team they're playing on the road, and Michigan is laying 4 points. So that's the odds makers telling you something. And 72% of the cash is on Michigan. It looks like the money has come in on the Michigan side, has influenced the line. So I like Michigan in this one. I do lean to that side for all those reasons there. Illinois is still riding the ranks. Yeah, from that win against Kansas, I know. Whoever does the rankings, the committee or whatever, do they not readjust based on do they not readjust based on the current rankings of teams that they played in the past? Do they not go back and readjust that? I don't know, because that win over Kansas is basically kind of meaningless, and Illinois didn't even play well in that game. As I've mentioned, Illinois had a big turnover edge in that game, and I think Kansas actually outgained them in Champlain, Illinois. I think it was Illinois was the home team in that one. So I do think Michigan is the better team. I like Michigan in that one. Not a play for me, but I do lean that way. I mean, based on how I talk, you can kind of tell like what my feelings are in some of these games as well. Like as far as like how strongly I think about some of these. Texas A&M, Mississippi State, I'm going to talk about just because I think the situation is pretty bad for Texas A&M. It's not one of my plays, but Texas A&M ranked 14th. Mississippi State is awful. They're terrible. They're by far the worst team in the SEC. So I'll just get that out of the way. But, of course, that means you're going to be getting them at a huge underdog price. So BYU is retaking the lead in this game against Oklahoma State, which I actually have it on over here, too. They just scored a touchdown, it looks like. My TV is behind the score that I have up on the scoreboard here. They just got the extra point. All right. So Texas A&M, they're coming off that huge win over Missouri, man. And that was their biggest win of the season. I mean, their one loss is a pretty excusable loss to Notre Dame. I mean, it was at home for Texas A&M, though, but still. I mean, Notre Dame's a good team. And beyond that, they haven't really played anybody that good. But then they crushed Missouri, man. And I think they went into a bye off of that game over Missouri. So they were riding high going into that bye, man. So I think that bye comes at a bad time for Texas A&M, man. Texas A&M. And it looks like, I don't know what's going on with their quarterback situation, where it looks like they had Wegman starting, and then they put Reed in instead. Wegman was back in that game against Missouri. I don't know what's going on with their quarterback situation, but I don't think it's that good of a sign when you see a team that doesn't really necessarily know who their quarterback is. So that's not great, but I assume it's probably going to be Wegman, right? If he did that well against Missouri, and they've had a bye to maybe get healthy again if that's what they need to do. But still, that bye I think is going to disrupt their momentum, man, because they went into the bye 5 straight wins off of their biggest win of the season against Missouri. Like, you have absolutely nothing to fix coming out of that bye, and you're facing Mississippi State, who's just pathetically bad, and you have LSU up next. So this is a sandwich spot for Texas A&M, man, in my opinion. This would be close to being a play for me on Mississippi State, but I don't know if I can. I just don't think I can bring myself to do it just because of how bad Mississippi State is. I don't know, man. Mississippi State, and well, they're also coming off like a fairly decent performance as well against Georgia. So I believe that was last week, right? So they did not have a bye. So they at least they do have a disadvantage here a little bit. So that may be one reason to stay away from Mississippi State as well. But I do think the Texas A&M is in a bad enough spot that I do lean to the Mississippi State side, getting all the points here. Mississippi State, I don't know what's going on with their quarterback situation either, where they had Shopping. Is he misshapen? I have no idea. And then they switched to Van Buren Jr. I don't even know who these guys are, but they suck. I mean, they don't have any FBS wins this year. But they did have to face Texas and Georgia in their last 2 games, so not really easy to do. And they faced Georgia in like a decent spot to catch Georgia, I think, because I believe they were coming out of a bye when they Mississippi State was coming out of a bye when they faced Georgia in that one. Georgia was coming off a couple of bigger games against Alabama and Auburn, so I think Mississippi State kind of caught them at a decent time and played decently against them, although I think there was like a backdoor score there. I don't know if it was a backdoor cover or not. I don't know what the line was in this game. Probably not. I think they probably were covering it. Yeah, it was a 34.5 point spread. So, I mean, they did get outgained significantly in this game, but still, the final score doesn't look that bad. Coming within 10 of Georgia as a 35-point underdog. So, Mississippi State is still coming off a somewhat big game there. I mean, a game where they played not horribly at the very least in that game, really. At least on the scoreboard. So I'll just stay away from this one. But Texas A&M, they're up from 14 to 19, it looks like. Definitely very public. 88% of the tickets and only 87% of the cash. I lean to taking the points with Mississippi State, and the line has climbed. So you're getting more points if you do like that side. I do think it's a sandwich spot for Texas A&M. So that one close to being on my card. So just figured I would point that one out. LSU, Arkansas. I mean, this is another one that's a big game. I'll talk about it. LSU ranked 8th. Arkansas not ranked. What do we got going on here? LSU, they're coming off a pretty big game, man, in my opinion. They beat Ole Miss in overtime last week, and it was a comeback win. Ole Miss was winning most of that game, although they never had a huge lead in the game, but they were winning pretty much throughout that game, and LSU was able to tie it, send it into overtime, and win the game in overtime. And that was a pretty big win, not only because it was against a highly ranked Ole Miss team, and an Ole Miss team that is pretty good defensively and held LSU's offense in check, because LSU is all offense, man. Their defense is not very good, and their offense is quite good. But I think it was also revenge for LSU, if I'm not mistaken, from last year. LSU, that was one of their only losses of the season last year. Yeah, that was that game. They lost by 6 at Ole Miss, and I'm pretty sure LSU was winning that game by like 9 with a couple of minutes left, and they blew it, and they gave up 2 straight scores and lost the game. So that was a big win, man, and even bigger, I think, if they remember that game from last year, because they got revenge on Ole Miss. And then what do they have up next? Texas A&M and then Alabama. So they have 2 ranked teams coming up next after this Arkansas game. I think it's a bad spot. It's a sandwich spot for LSU, man. In Arkansas, they're coming out of a bye, so they have the rest advantage. My only issue with Arkansas here, as you can probably see here, is that they're coming off 2 big games in a row where they were close against Texas A&M. They played close against them, and then they beat Tennessee. That's a huge upset win for Arkansas. I mean, they beat Tennessee, and that's how they went into a bye. So I'd be a little bit concerned that Arkansas, because their last game was such a high, that did also kind of be in a letdown spot. And that bye didn't necessarily come at the best possible time, because they went into it on such a high note. But they have LSU coming to their house, so I don't think they're going to overlook LSU. So I do still like the Arkansas side here. I think the spot is worse for LSU, as I just pointed out. But it's not a great spot for either team. And that was one of those situations where when Arkansas pulled off that upset, man, I was like, who's Arkansas playing next? I was like, just let me fade Arkansas, but nope, they're going into a bye, and now they get an LSU team who's in an even worse spot. So the market is strongly indicating on the Arkansas side, and it looks too easy to take LSU, man. LSU's down from 3 to 2.5, so it is off that key number 3, which does mean it's a fairly significant line move, though. But obviously, if you want Arkansas, you'd rather have the +3 than the 2.5, and maybe it would go back up, but I don't know, because the cash is so strongly on Arkansas here. 70% of the cash on Arkansas. Public's still on LSU at 60%, because of course they're going to be public. They're the ranked team. They're the team with the better record. I mean, public, I'm surprised they're not more strong on LSU, man. It just looks so easy to lay like less than a field goal with LSU. You're almost just laying them to win the game. So I think the line almost looks like a trap. Like, it looks too easy to take LSU, man. But I don't think the line's going to get back up to 3. I could be wrong about that. Maybe the public will come in really heavy tomorrow on this game. Like later in the day, maybe even, because it's at 7 p.m. Eastern, so I don't know. LSU and Ole Miss was fun. Yeah, I had it on up here for a little while, and I'm not a fan of LSU, man. I'll just put that out there. So I was rooting for Ole Miss in that game. I was not particularly happy about that, but LSU's defense still sucks, man. So they're a pretty bad defense, in my opinion. Their offense is definitely good. And Arkansas may have some issues stopping that passing attack of LSU there. Just their overall offensive attack, really. But Arkansas, they have a decent offense as well, so they might be able to score some points in that one as well. So over might be a way to look. I mean, overs are never really that bad a way to look in LSU's games, although their last couple of games I think haven't gone over. But this one's sitting at 57. This Arkansas defense isn't really that formidable, so 73% of the tickets and 94% of the cash on the over. I mean, just my quick thought about that game would be that the over kind of makes sense in that game as well. Georgia, Texas, biggest game of the week. We'll talk about that. Yeah, Death Valley. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. I've just never been a fan of that team. I don't know what else to say about it. I just don't like them. They just don't. They rub me the wrong way. Always have, and I can't really explain it. What was I going to say? Yeah, Georgia, Texas, biggest game of the week, obviously. I don't know if this is the College Game Day game or if this is not, because I think this is in a different stadium, right? This is not at, or no, I guess it is. It's in Austin, Texas, so I guess it is at Texas. I thought this was in an NFL stadium, but it's not. I think it's a home game for Texas, so never mind about that. But this this game is hard for me to read, man. You got Georgia down to number 5 in the country, and Texas number 1. Texas hasn't really done anything wrong. I mean, they've been the number 1 team for a few weeks now. They've just been crushing their opponents. But the issue that I have with Texas is we still don't really know how good they really are. I mean, their defense is one of the best in the country, maybe the best, based on a lot of these metrics. But they beat Michigan when Michigan was still kind of figuring out what they were doing. Michigan, I think, had not switched to Orgy yet. So that game, I mean, yeah, it's still impressive to go into the big house and beat Michigan 31-12. But Michigan didn't have everything together. Like, they've gotten better since that game at the very least. The rest of these opponents, very, very weak slate of opponents up until Oklahoma. But Oklahoma, I don't think they're that good either, man. They really struggle offensively at the very least. Although still Texas completely blew them out in a rivalry game, in a game that I expected a better showing from Oklahoma in that one. But I think the under still hit, right? I mentioned the under as a lean in that one because Oklahoma couldn't score at all. So the under still cashed in that one. Texas is also coming off. I mean, that is a big game just because it's the Red River rivalry, or the Red River shootout. But they're not going to overlook Georgia, obviously. I mean, this is arguably an even bigger game, even though the Red River shootout is one of the biggest games on their slate. Obviously, that's a huge rivalry between those two teams. But Texas and Georgia, I mean, this is also a big game. And Georgia has not looked as good, man. So Texas has basically been annihilating opponents, whereas Georgia has been struggling. I mean, they almost lost to Kentucky, but we know Kentucky's got a pretty solid defense, man. Kentucky, they're better than we thought they were. They're like probably a top 10 defense in the country. Their offense is pretty bad, but Kentucky, not bad. And then they lost to Alabama in that game that I talked about already. I mean, that wound up being a close game. I mean, Georgia, after falling behind by that much against Alabama, they could have potentially just gotten down on themselves and packed it in. They did not do that. They came all the way back and took the lead, but then, of course, they did totally lapse on that next drive, which doesn't look great, but still, the fact that they were able to come back like that does look pretty good. Beating Auburn, I mean, not horrible, really. So Georgia has faced and they faced Clemson early in the season and wrecked them. And Clemson isn't that bad. So Georgia has faced the tougher schedule, man. So some aspects of this had me initially liking the Georgia side in this game because I'm like, well, Texas is just blowing everybody out. Georgia has had a lot of close calls. So Georgia doesn't look like the better team here. Texas has looked way better. And you're getting... And Georgia's faced a tougher schedule. So I'm like, I got to like Georgia in this game, right? Plus, Georgia, is this revenge at all against Texas? Because Georgia, we know that their direct revenge was against Alabama, right? Because Alabama was the team that beat them, ended their undefeated season last year. Alabama beat them in the SEC championship. So that's why Georgia didn't get in. But because Texas had beaten Alabama, Texas got in instead of Georgia as well. So is Georgia going to have a little bit of some sort of revenge on their mind because of that too? Because Texas, maybe they think they should have been in the playoff last year instead of Texas. Maybe. But then if you think about it, that line of thinking kind of goes both ways here. Actually, Texas might want to beat Georgia to prove that they were the team that belonged in the playoffs, because that was the whole thing last year. Even I was saying Georgia should be in. I was saying Washington was the team that was the worst of those four that shouldn't be in. But a lot of people were saying Texas shouldn't be in. I thought Georgia was better than Texas last year. So Texas had to hear that throughout the playoffs. And yeah, Texas lost in the playoffs to Washington. But Texas, they constantly had to hear, man, like Texas shouldn't have been in the playoffs. Georgia was the better team. So is this Texas' chance to show that they belonged in the playoff last year and they're better than Georgia? Maybe. I mean, that seems like a decent motivating factor to me for Texas here. So really, really a tough game to read here, man. Like the situation initially, just for all the reasons that I already said, kind of had me leaning to the Georgia side, but when I think about it more, I don't know, man. Just because that motivational factor might be a little bit stronger on Texas. Texas is up from 3.5 to 5, though. So it's like, I don't know. This is a home game for Texas. So Texas probably gets like, I don't know, maybe 4 at least for home field. So the odds makers are kind of telling you that Texas is like half point better, a half point to 1 point better than Georgia, basically, is what the odds makers are telling you. And, you know, thinking about it more, maybe the odds makers do have this one right. Maybe Texas is the slightly better team this year. I just think it's hard to tell right now because Texas has faced a weaker schedule, so I think we just don't entirely know. But they've beaten everybody they should have beaten, and they've blown most of them out. So that's what you're getting with Texas. 53% of the tickets and 72% of the cash on Texas, with the line moving up on Texas. I've heard multiple professionals that are like my favorite professionals, the ones that I have learned from the most and respect the most, do like the Texas side in this one. So I'm not gonna want to disagree with them. When all's said and done, I guess that I would have to lean with the direction that they're leaning and lean to the Texas side here. And the market is kind of the clincher for me here. It looks like the market is also indicating on Texas. So I would lean to Texas in this one slightly, even though that clashes with my original way of thinking about this and the way that I've thought about this for like most of the season. With Joe Burrow, I don't like Joe Burrow, man. Especially with his bleach hair. I think he's a douche. I never liked him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't mind. I do like him. Jamar Chase, no problem with him either. True freshman Ryan Wingo, really good for Texas. Yeah, Texas, they're they just have a great roster all over the place, man. There's no doubt about that. Georgia, also a very stacked roster. I mean, we know this. Like, these two teams are both really, really good. I mean, Texas, their offense is really good behind Quinn Ewers, obviously. Their defense is maybe the best in the country. Georgia, also really good on both sides of the ball. So, also the total in this one's gone up from 55 to 57, juice to the overs. This is a pretty high total, man. 83% of the tickets and 96% of the cash on the total. And in a game like this that seems like it's a big heavyweight clash, I tend to want to play unders, but in college football, it tends to be less the case that those games tend to go under than in like professional sports, where professional sports is a lot more like of a feeling out process. It seems like in these college games, the offenses sometimes can like light up the scoreboard a bit in games like this. So I don't know. And the market does actually look like it's indicating on the over. And this total is higher than I thought it would come out as, man, because you are looking at two teams that know how to play defense, and they both have good offense. So I did not expect the total to be this high, but it is. But, I mean, of course, the odds makers are going to have to put it up a little bit high because the public's going to come in on the over in a game like this. But I don't think it's all just because of that. Kansas State, West Virginia. I'll talk about this one briefly. I think Kansas State, this is a tricky spot for Kansas State, man. I mean, their wins are not looking as good. Kansas State, I do think they're a good team, but their wins that they have so far against Arizona and Oklahoma State, when those teams are ranked, not looking as good now because those teams have both dropped from the rankings and haven't been as good. And then in their most recent game, they beat Coach Prime, Colorado, who I keep saying is constantly overhyped. But Kansas State, I mean, that's a big win for them, I think, just because of the hype that surrounds Colorado. And Kansas State had to go out to Colorado and do it. And Colorado's a newcomer to the Big 12. So it's a pretty big win, even though I think Kansas State is the better team. And, I mean, they were favored on the road in that game. And this game, actually, Kansas State, they were actually better in this game than it looks. They were winning, as you can see, by 2 touchdowns in the third quarter there, 21-7. Holding Colorado way down. And then they let Colorado get back into the game and actually take the lead before Kansas State was able to score and win the game at the end there. Big win nonetheless for Kansas State, and they do have their big rivalry game up next against Kansas. But does that mean as much with Kansas being a 1-5 team? I don't know. I mean, they at least probably know Kansas is going to be gunning for them because Kansas State has been the better of the two football programs for a long time now. And Kansas is the better basketball program, obviously. But Kansas State, I mean, they probably know Kansas wants them. So Kansas State might just have one eye looking ahead for that reason. And this is a second straight road game, having to go to West Virginia for a Saturday night game, which is not an easy place to play. I mean, in West Virginia, Morgantown, the only thing that people have to do is football. So when there's a college football game, the whole town shows up to the college football game, man. So it's going to be packed. It's going to be a wild environment there. It's not an easy place to play in Morgantown, man. So I think it's a bit of a difficult spot for Kansas State in this one. And then what else? Kansas State's ranked 17th there. But West Virginia is also coming off kind of a tough loss to Iowa State, who Iowa State's up in the top 10 in the country now because their defense is really good. So West Virginia was not able to do anything against Iowa State in that game. West Virginia now staying at home, but they are still coming off a fairly big game, so I'm staying off that game, but it does look like kind of a difficult spot for Kansas State to me. Kansas State's up from 2.5 to 3, but they are public. Public, obviously, is going to be laying the points with the ranked team here. 78% of the tickets and only 64% of the cash. I think it's a one-loss Kansas State team as well? Yeah, 5-1. So it almost looks too easy to take Kansas State here. Again, like I always say, like laying a field goal, or really almost even less than a field goal there. They're probably still 2.5s out there with the line being at 3 with reduced juice consensus there. So it looks too easy to take Kansas State, in my opinion, or to lay the points with them. 78% of tickets and only 64% of the cash on Kansas State. So those are my feelings on a whole bunch of these games, man. I don't know if I had any other games that were like almost plays for me that I wanted to talk about that aren't. I mean, this UConn line, I would just say, kind of looks like a bit of a trap because you have an ACC team in Wake Forest going to UConn, and UConn's flipped from a 1-point dog to a 1-point favorite. I mean, what gives with that? 87% of the tickets and 82% of the cash are on Wake Forest. So the public thinks that it looks really easy to take Wake as a 1-point underdog now as an ACC team against an independent UConn team, but UConn hasn't been playing that bad, really. I mean, they're 4-2. They haven't faced a really difficult schedule, but and Wake Forest is not one of the better ACC teams, and they're sitting at 2-4, so they do have the worst record. The odds makers are not telling you that UConn's the better team, obviously. They're only laying 1 point at home, but they are telling you that this is a little bit closer than you might think. And it just looks like a trap line. It looks way too easy almost to take UConn in that game, so as far as the scheduling spot, I don't really know if there's anything to talk about as far as the situation there, but yeah, it just looks too easy, man. And Wake Forest, they are coming off a big-ish game against Clemson, but they did get totally wrecked by Clemson, and they do have another ACC game up next where they have to go out to the Pacific Coast to face Stanford. So maybe it's a sandwich spot just because it's in between two ACC teams. I don't know. Because when you're coming off a blowout loss like that, you might not totally lapse in focus. And UConn, I mean, this is one of their bigger games of the season, man. They did play Big Ten Maryland, got wrecked. They played Duke on the road, an ACC team. But this is, I believe, their only home game that they have against a big conference team. They do have a road game against Syracuse later this year. But this is the only time this year that they have one of the Power 5 conference teams, if you still want to call it that, coming into their house. It's the only time this year that that's happening. So it is a big home game for UConn. So I do think UConn is probably the way to look in that game. Let's get to my actual plays an hour into the video, as usual, right? I got plays all throughout the day, man. One is, I think, at 12:45 p.m., not at noon. And then another afternoon game and 2 night games, I think. I don't know. I'll figure it out in a second. First game up is Oklahoma +1. Yeah, I mean, I always wince. It's probably a good thing when you wince when you're making a play, or it's like you almost have to grab your hand and not push the button. Like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. This is so ugly. Stop me, please. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be like that on a lot of these. And Oklahoma's ugly. I mean, they've dropped from the rankings here. Holy crap. All right. What do we got going on here? Oklahoma, they have dropped from the rankings. They are bad. I mean, they just look awful recently, man. I don't know what else to say about this. South Carolina, I mean, they are coming off a huge game against, who are they playing? They're coming off a huge game against Alabama. So they're coming off 2 big games in a row against Ole Miss and Alabama, and they almost beat Alabama, man. South Carolina, I mean, they were almost able to do this. They were down 1, or no, they were winning the game going into the fourth quarter, and then down 1 all the way until the final 2 minutes of the game, and then they scored a touchdown where they could have tied the game at the end, and they missed a 2-point conversion against Alabama right at the end there. So brutal way to lose that game for South Carolina, man. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but I think coming off that game, and it just looks like not the greatest spot for them. They do have a bye coming up after this, but they have to face Texas A&M up on deck after this. So this is going to be a really difficult spot, man, for South Carolina. Coming off that game, they do have a ranked Texas A&M team, and they have to go on a second straight road game here as well, out to Norman. And they haven't really left, like, really the Eastern time zone yet this year. I don't know if Kentucky is, but these road games, they've basically stayed kind of around, like, the Eastern time zone. Now they have to go a little bit further out west. So all of this makes it look like a difficult spot to me. Oklahoma, I know they're coming off the Red River rivalry game, but they just got absolutely annihilated, man. So I think maybe they'll show up focused after they just got embarrassed in a game like that. So I do like Oklahoma in this one. I think the market looks like it's against me on this one. South Carolina's flipped from a 2.5 dog to a 1.5 point favorite. 54% of the tickets and 67% of the cash on the South Carolina side. So I don't really love that necessarily, but I mean, what else can you say about that? What else can you do about that? Like, sometimes I'm not going to necessarily agree with what the market indicators are, and hopefully the market indicators shift to indicate that the market is actually agreeing with me more than what I think it is right now. So we'll see what happens in that one, but that's play number one is on Oklahoma, +1 in that one, as ugly as that seems. Next play was one that I had my eye on because I thought it was a bad spot for USC, I believe is what I'm fading here. I'm going to take the points with Maryland, +7.5 in this one. USC down from 8 to 7.5. USC is certainly public here. 75% of the tickets and 63% of the cash on USC. So they are public. They have less of the cash than the tickets. The line looks like it's moved down a little bit on the Maryland side here, and I think this is a bad situation, man. I was eyeing this for a while, man. I mean, look what USC has done. Last week, they had a really tough game. They hosted Penn State, and they almost were able to beat Penn State. I think Penn State, they had Penn State on the ropes, man. USC was beating them 20-6 at halftime. They were beating them going into the fourth quarter by 3. Blew that lead, took the lead again by a touchdown, and then they were winning by a touchdown with a couple minutes left in the game. Penn State tied it back up and then won on a field goal in overtime. So USC had number 4 ranked Penn State, undefeated Penn State, coming to their house, almost knocked them off. Such a brutal way to lose that game for USC. And now what do they have to do? Yeah, they have to go all the way to the Eastern time zone and face Maryland. Yeah, good luck with that. Where they have not gone this far east yet this season either, and they're not used to doing it because they're in the ACC now, right? Or is that what this is? Or no, what is this? Big Ten now? Yeah, Big Ten. ACC, that's the old Maryland. Big Ten, I'm so out of my mind right now. Yeah, they're in the Big Ten now for the first time this year. Look what they've done in their road Big Ten games so far. Yeah, they're 0-2 against Michigan, but I mean, I'll give them a pass for the Michigan loss. But they also lost at Minnesota. So when they've had to go on the road to these unfamiliar venues, hasn't been a good situation there. They do have Rutgers up next, and Rutgers, I mean, they're 4-2, so they're at least better than Maryland. Maryland's 0-3 in conference, winless in conference, and behind them in the standings. So if they're going to overlook a team, it's probably going to be this Maryland team in a spot like this. So it's a bad travel spot, and it's a letdown spot. And look at Maryland, man. They're still trying to get their first conference win, so I think they're going to be motivated for that reason. But looking at what Maryland has done, they have an extra day off as well because they played on Friday. But look at that game on Friday, man. They were coming off a pretty big game against Indiana. So I think they had gone into a bye actually after that, but still, I think they just kind of slipped up, man, in this game against Northwestern. And maybe they were even looking ahead to USC. I don't know, but Maryland played a really bad game against Northwestern, and this looks really bad on the scoreboard. How do you give up 37 points to this anemic Northwestern offense? Well, I'll show you what happened in that game. Maryland outgained them by almost 70 yards and had 25-10 in first downs in the game and outpossessed them by like 7.5 minutes. But they lost the game because they were -4 in turnovers. They were turning it over all over the place in this game. So this is a very misleading result there. I don't think Maryland is as bad as that looks. They faced a couple of fairly difficult teams. I mean, their other losses are to Michigan State, which I didn't think that was the greatest spot for Maryland in that one either. And Michigan State, I mean, they're at least decent defensively. Not a horrible loss there, really, even though I know it was at home as a favorite for Maryland. And then you can excuse them losing to Indiana. Indiana's been playing really well. So I don't know if Maryland is even as bad as they look, really, or as we think they are. So plus 7.5, Maryland. Yeah, Maryland. Yeah, that's right. Woof. Up next, this is going to be the worst one, man. Ball State plus 27. I mean, you might even be able to get more than 27 here. It looks like it's headed to 27.5, and maybe you'll be able to, I don't know if it'll hit 28 or anything like that, but there's probably no hurry to get this one because you might at least be able to get the hook on the 27. Doesn't really matter between 27 and 27.5, maybe just a little bit. Vandy is up from minus 26 to minus 27 because, yeah, I mean, Ball State sucks. Even for a MAC team, they're not good, but this is all about the spot. Vandy's very public, 60% of the tickets, but 82% of the cash over on the other side on Ball State here. I am doing it, man. I was looking for a spot to fade Vandy in like a letdown spot. Couldn't do it last week, and now I think this is where the letdown comes in. I mean, look at the last games, the last 3 games they played, man. They played Missouri tough, lost by 3 on the road there. Then they went into a bye, came out of that bye. I think it was the bye, right? Did I say it was a bye? I think it was. And then they came out of that and they upset Alabama as a 20-something point underdog. Then off of that, they went on the road and they beat Kentucky as well. And Kentucky was off of, I think, beating Ole Miss maybe and coming out of a bye. And Kentucky was a double-digit favorite in that game. I still thought it was a worse spot for Vandy than for Kentucky in that one, but the market looked like it was on the Vandy side in that one, and Vandy went in and won outright again. So now you have Vandy off of 3 straight big games. They're off of 2 huge upsets in a row, really. One like monumental upset and another big upset, both as double-digit underdogs. Now they get a MAC team, Ball State, and up next they have Texas next week, and SEC play resumes. So this is the one like spot left in their schedule that is basically meaningless, other than the fact that, I mean, yeah, maybe they need to like win the game, but they don't need to win by a huge margin like this to do that. So this is a spot where I think they could easily overlook their opponent, especially with how bad Ball State has been. And Ball State, I mean, they're coming off a game that might help them in 2 ways, I would actually say, because they had not won an FBS game after they beat Missouri State, an FCS team. They were 0-4 in FBS, although they did lose to Miami and James Madison, and they got killed, though. But those are at least decent teams. Central Michigan and Western Michigan, maybe not so much, but they played them competitively. So Ball State, the teams that are like mid-tier MAC teams, they played okay against them, and then they beat Kent State, who was one of the worst teams in the MAC, maybe the worst. But I mean, that still doesn't even look that great because Ball State barely scraped by them, even though I think Ball State was only a favorite of a couple points because it was on the road at Kent State. So Ball State was probably only a small favorite in that game. But still, I mean, it's Kent State who's just been doing nothing right at all, has no wins, and Ball State basically almost lost to Kent State. So that could serve 2 purposes. It could serve to refocus them a little bit because they played poorly against a bad Kent State team, and they finally got that monkey off their back. They finally got that first win. It can kind of break that losing momentum, finally get your FBS win, and now they have what's kind of like their biggest game on their schedule. They get to go face an SEC team, even though it's not one of the name SEC teams. Still, you get to face an SEC team. I think you're going to want to bring your game, man, and show up. So I like Ball State in that one, plus that huge amount of points in that one. JC, what's up, man? Justin, Missouri State, is that your school, brother? You're moving up to CUSA. All right. Missouri State, I mean, I know they're in, are they in the Missouri Valley right now? I pay attention more to their basketball program just because it's all one big D1, one big happy D1 family in basketball there. But still, I don't think they're that great with basketball, right? They're probably better at football than basketball, actually, even though they're FCS. And my final play is another one. So 2 of these I'm actually going against the market, but my situational Reed is putting me on these. It's Kentucky, -1.5. That same Kentucky team I just mentioned. They're at Florida. They've flipped to the favorite at the very least from 1.5 as an underdog to a 1.5-point favorite. And it looks like it's going higher than that. 60% of the tickets and cash on Kentucky, so I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if the fact that they flipped favorites means that the cash is coming in on the Kentucky side, but what I will say is that the one thing about Kentucky is that, the one thing about the reason why this line may have moved a little bit, which I hope that it's actually because of actual market movement, but one other factor here is that Graham Mertz is hurt for Florida. So I know that might mean that Florida's in kind of an injured player theory spot, maybe, but I don't think it's as significant for Florida as far as the injured player theory is concerned in this one because, what was I going to say? I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, man. Because this other guy, whoever Florida has, Lagway, because he had a good game against Samford, I guess. I mean, who cares? 456 yards. You had, a bunch of, the Florida fans are coming in and saying, bench Mertz for Lagway. Mertz sucks because Mertz was doing bad against, Texas A&M, who actually have a really good defense. Mertz is a pretty good quarterback, man. I mean, he had 70-something% completion percentage last year. He's not really the problem there. But, yeah, I mean, he actually hasn't been doing well this season. So, I don't know. So, Lagway is probably going to be the quarterback here because he was the next man up behind Mertz. So, Mertz is hurt. But I think the fact that it could be an injured player theory spot, I think is actually mitigated a little bit because I don't really see it affecting the line that much because I think Lagway versus Mertz, I don't even know if that's that much of a difference between the two. Really, the way Florida's been playing, I really don't know if there's that much of a difference. And because Lagway has already played a little bit, so I don't know if this Florida team is going to be in a mindset where it's our guy's injured, we really need to step up our game for this. I don't know. And is that really going to be their mindset when they're in a sandwich spot? I mean, look at the spot that they're in. They just went on the road to Tennessee, and they almost beat Tennessee. They held Tennessee's offense down. Florida was winning 10-0 early. The game was still tied in the third quarter. Tennessee didn't even score in the first half in this game. Florida was winning throughout the whole game, basically going into the third quarter. And they were winning until late in the third quarter when it was finally tied up. Tennessee took the lead, and then Florida tied the game again right at the end, which I guess Florida's kicker is named Smack. That's great. We're talking Smack. Florida tied it right at the end to send it to overtime, and then they still wound up losing in overtime as a double-digit underdog, a 13.5-point underdog. That's brutal, dude. Brutal way to lose that game for Florida. I don't know what else to say about that. And, I mean, yeah, what else is there to say? I mean, I think that puts them in a hangover spot. And up next for Florida, they got, what do they have next? Well, they have a bye next. But then after the bye, they have the huge backyard, whatever it is. What is it? The world's biggest tailgate party, Florida, Georgia. That's their biggest rivalry of the year, man. They got Georgia up next. And then Texas, LSU, Ole Miss. And then a rivalry against Florida State. So this game is the least meaningful game left on their schedule, really, if you just look at the fact that it's all ranked teams up after this and then a rivalry against Florida State. So I like the spot better for Kentucky. And then Kentucky, they've fallen to 3-3, man. I think they're in a kind of a spot where they're going to want to have to change something, man, because as I said, they weren't in the best spot coming off that big upset win over Ole Miss there. So I didn't think it was a great spot for them coming off of that game, coming out of a bye even. I didn't think it was that great, and they lost to Vandy as a double-digit favorite. So now you got Kentucky, who was in a game that they should have won as a double-digit favorite. They lost. They didn't play well, so I think that's going to help them refocus for this game. So I think Kentucky is in much more of a positive spot there because they're coming off a pretty ugly loss. And one thing that showed me something is that they were still able to blow out Ohio, and I lost money on that one. I was on Ohio on that because I thought that was a bad sandwich spot after Kentucky. They did play really hard against Georgia and almost beat Georgia, and then they had that game sandwiched in between Georgia and Ole Miss. So, I don't know. So that at least showed me something that they still showed up in that game at the very least. But then again, they didn't show up against South Carolina. They got their doors totally blown off by South Carolina. I think I won on that game, actually, on South Carolina. I think I was on South Carolina in that one because of the huge look ahead to Georgia. But I think that's going to do it. I think that's it. We're done. hour 14 in this time. So I spent more time talking about my non-bets than my bets, I think. Maybe I'm just getting a little bit more efficient. Florida's whole schedule's a knuckle sandwich. Yeah. Their women's basketball is good in Missouri State. Yeah, I think I probably knew that at some point. I don't know. I don't know if men's basketball or football is worse either. That's going to do it for me, though, man. I'm Toad, of course, as usual. My plays that I've given out today on the show for college football: Oklahoma +1, Maryland +7.5, Ball State +27, and Kentucky -1.5. Those are the 4 plays. And I did have one other play. I'm 1-0 in college football this week with Utah +7 the other day on Wednesday. So that was a win for me. So let's continue the winning ways, man. Or let's break the loss that I had with baseball today. Let's break this new slump. Let's not let it continue. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow me, of course. Follow the Tower Gang podcast. Tower Gang everywhere, man. Go subscribe to the Patreon. Patreon.com/Tower Gang, of course. You get live pre-show, live post-show. You get to hang out with us in the Telegram. And we're going to be at Bohemian Grove the end of next week, Friday, Saturday. So go see us there. It's in Central Florida. Get your tickets. It's going to be a live podcast and comedy event. Conspiracies and comedy. Let's do it. And as always, also follow flapper.net. Follow Flapper. Follow Flapper. No, follow flapper.net. FLAPPR.net. The world's finest smut blog, of course. They talk about sports, humor, women. I am doing betting odds for them for their annual Milkers of the Year contest or whatever it is. So betting odds are up, man. They're shifting around. Sydney Sweeney is the favorite right now, and I think she's helping her case a little bit by stopping like thieves in her neighborhood or whatever, and she's now playing some boxer chick in some upcoming movie. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's all pretty hot. So go give them a follow as well. Peace out, guys. That's going to do it from me. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Peace.